Not finish it, but this is, for me, I think this is the most critical lesson in the book of Exodus. One of the things that we really need to understand, because as it moves along, we talk about the Passover, and as later on, the Passover has to do with what we call Easter. The day Jesus arose is based on the first Sunday after the Passover. So Passover is important where it happens as we go through. There's a lot of importance in this one. When we get through with this, I'm going to ask y'all to make a decision. You want me to come back next Sunday and start teaching again in Exodus? You like to do Israel? It doesn't matter to me, either one. So we'll get going on this one and see. We need to read several verses from last Sunday again to lead us back into today, or it won't make sense. If you remember from last week, the Egyptians suffered through 9 plagues, and they were ready to see the 10th and the final plague. That's where we are. And last week we read, so Moses says, this is what the Lord says, about midnight I will go through Egypt. Who will go through Egypt?
The Lord.
The Lord. Every firstborn son in Egypt will die, from the firstborn son of Pharaoh who sits on the throne to the firstborn son of the female slave who is at a handmill, and all the firstborn of the cattle as well. There will be loud wailing throughout Egypt, worse than there has ever been or will be again. But among the Israelites, not a dog will bark at any person or animal. Then you will know that the Lord makes a distinction between Israel and Egypt. All these officials of yours will come to me, bowing down before me and saying, go, you and all the people who follow you. After that I will leave. Then Moses, hot with anger, left Pharaoh. The Lord had said to Moses, Pharaoh will refuse to listen to you, so that my wonders may be multiplied in Egypt. So remember, we talked about Pharaoh's heart. God hardened Pharaoh's heart. He made him deny letting the people go. And he did it for a reason. The reason is in bold print, so that my wonders may be multiplied. So God's got a plan. You don't see his plan all the time. Moses and Aaron performed all these wonders before Pharaoh, but the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he would not let the Israelites go out of his country. Now, we're going to read about God's instructions for the first Passover meal. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron, in Egypt, this month is to be for you the first month of the year. Tell the whole community of Israel that on the what day of the month? 10th day of the month, each man is to take a lamb for his family, one for each household. Now, this month was called Nisan, and God said this will be your first month of the year, and it is on the calendar today. There's also 2 other Hebrew words that mean Nisan, if you happen to see them. Abib was one of them. If any household is too small for a whole lamb, they must share one with their nearest neighbor, having taken into account the number of people there are. You are to determine the amount of lamb needed in accordance with what each person will eat. The animals you choose must be year-old males without defect. You may take them from the sheep or the goats. Take care of them until the 14th day of the month. What did we say before? They were supposed to select them on what day? 10th. And now then they will keep them till the 14th day of the month, when all the members of the community of Israel must slaughter them at twilight. What is twilight? Just as the sun's going down. Now it's interesting. Think about this. Think about the little children playing with this baby lamb in the house for 4 days. And later the father kills it and the mom cooks it. That's what God wanted. That's what makes it a sacrifice. That's what makes it a sacrifice. Then they are to take some of the blood and they put it on the sides and tops of the door frames of the houses where they eat the lambs. The same night they are to eat the meat roasted over fire, along with bitter herbs and bread made without yeast. Do not eat the raw meat raw or boiled in water, but roast it over a fire with the head, the legs, and internal organs. They were not to do anything. They make me all hungry. Or what? Do not leave any of it till in the morning. If some is left till morning, you must burn it. I think you could burn it. This is how you are to eat it. Like this. With your cloak tucked into your belt. What does that mean? They're going to leave in haste and they're going to tuck their coat and so they can walk quickly. With your cloak tucked into your belt, your sandals on your feet. So you're ready to get out of there when God says go. And your staff in your hand. Eat it in haste. So you can only eat with one hand because you got your staff in one hand. At least the men do. But God has a plan for all of this. On the same night I will pass through Egypt. Who will pass through? God. Yeah, the Lord will pass through. Strike down every firstborn, both of people and animals, and I will bring judgment on all the gods of Egypt. I am the Lord. The blood will be a sign for you on the houses where you are, and when who sees the blood?
The Lord.
And he says, who will pass over you? The Lord. No destructive plague will touch you. When who strikes Egypt?
Lord.
Now, why am I saying that all that? How many have you read and you see they talk about the death angel pass over Egypt? No. Death angel isn't even in the Bible, the term death angel. There's two places where it talks about angel of death, and I know one of them is in Revelation, but it has nothing to do with this. So I think it's important we understand it was God. Now we will have one controversial verse in a minute, we'll look at it, but it's God who's passing over. So when you see pictures, you always see this pretty angel going over the houses. Well, I guess God could look like an angel. Nobody has seen him, but I don't know. But it's God, not an angel. This is a day you are to commemorate for the generations to come. You shall celebrate it as a festival to the Lord. He wants to celebrate it. You don't have a book to write it down and scatter it to all the people. So you have a ceremony to commemorate a festival, and the kids are going to say, why are we doing this? And what do you have to do? You teach them. So you pass it on from generation to generation on here. For 7 days, you're to eat bread made without yeast. On the first day, remove the yeast from your houses, for whoever eats anything with yeast in it from the first day through the 7th day must be cut off from Israel. Talking about a 7-day festival. On the first day, hold a sacred assembly, and another one on the 7th day. Do not work all of these days except to prepare food for everyone to eat. That is all you may do on these 7 days. So that festival, they call it the Festival of the Unleavened Bread, is still celebrated by the Jews today, once a year, and that's the way they teach the younger generations to come.
Wally, what is the significance of leaving the yeast out?
I think we're going to kind of get to that in a minute, but it represents leaving with haste. They didn't have time to sit around. They needed enough bread to take with them on the Exodus, but they didn't have time to sit there and let it rise. And so it just demonstrates the haste which they had to get out of there.
Okay.
And then when you do this and you make your kids 100 years later go 7 days in a row, if you're a Jew, and the bread you give him has no yeast in it, you're going to get his attention. He's going to know why. And so you're going to teach your children. So all of these things are so you teach your children, and they pass it on from generation to generation on there. Okay, I think we did that. For 7 days, no yeast is to be found in your houses. So we don't have anybody sneaking around hiding some and doing this. And anyone, whether foreigner or native born, who eats anything with yeast in it must be cut off from the community of Israel. That's during that 7-day period. Eat nothing made with yeast. Wherever you live, you must eat unleavened bread 7 days of the feast. Then Moses summoned all the elders of Israel and said to them, "Go at once and select the animals for the families and slaughter the Passover lamb. Take a bunch of hyssop, dip it into the blood in the basin, and put some of the blood on the top of the door and on both sides of the frame. None of you shall go out the door of your house until the morning." Why is that? Well, anybody in that house with the blood over it, God's not going to kill their firstborn son. You don't want to be outside of that house. When the Lord goes through the land, who goes through the land?
Lord.
It didn't say death angel? I guess not. To strike down the Egyptians, he will see the blood on the tops and the sides of the door frames, and he will pass over that doorway, and he will not permit the destroyer to enter your house and strike you down. I put a little star by that word destroyer. You will be surprised every time you go to look it up in the commentaries. They skip this verse. Nobody can make a comment on it, hardly. No one really knows the interpretation of this word destroyer as used in verse 23. Even AI said it didn't know. Artificial intelligence. You look at that and you can study and you can have some guesses. And I guess he'll talk about himself. The destroyer will not enter your house. Being me, God, I won't enter in your house and kill your firstborn. Some want to try to say, well, maybe it represents Satan. Well, I don't see that coming into it. So every once in a while you hit one of these things you're not really sure. I went back to different versions of the Bible, and they all use the word destroyer. So destroyer has been used in the Bible as a name for Satan. So nobody's real sure exactly what that is. So I can't make up something and tell you, and when we really don't have an answer for that. You get to the Life Application Bible, and you go to that, and you go down there to the bottom. Oh, they skipped that one. There are things in the Bible that are not clear, that we don't always understand. That's one of them. Saved by the blood of the Lamb. Saved by the blood of the Lamb. Do you see the connection? Blood over the top on the cross, blood on the cross, blood on the doorhouses. The Passover. Obey these instructions as a lasting ordinance for you and your descendants. And they are still following the Jews today. When you enter the land that the Lord will give you as he promised, observe this ceremony. And when your children ask you, what does this ceremony mean? Now you can see the purpose of the Passover meal and the festival of the unleavened bread. It's so that the children will ask, what is it? Why are we doing this? Why are we eating that bread like that? It's terrible. And so you tell them the history of the Passover and what God did for the children of Israel. It also paints a picture, as we just saw, of the future when Jesus will die on the cross, and we too will be saved by the blood of the Lamb. They were saved by the blood of the Lamb. Then tell them it is the Passover sacrifice to the Lord, who passed over the houses of the Israelites in Egypt, and he spared our home when he struck down the Egyptians. Then the people bowed down in worship. The Israelites did just what the Lord commanded Moses and Aaron. At midnight, the Lord struck all the firstborn in Egypt, the firstborn of Pharaoh who sat at the throne, the firstborn of the prisoner who was in the dungeon, and the firstborn of all the livestock as well. Pharaoh and all of his officials and all the Egyptians got up during the night, and there was loud wailing in Egypt, for there was not a house without someone dead in Egypt. During the night, Pharaoh summoned Moses and Aaron and said, "Up, leave my people, you and the Israelites. Go worship the Lord as you requested. Take your flocks and herds, and as you have said, and go." And I thought this was funny. He said, "And also bless me." I I think he finally got it. that Aaron and Moses worshiped the God of the universe. And also bless me. Huh?
He didn't get it all the way
No,
because he went after him.
no, he just, the part that's
But he
inside.
did
See,
get their
you
attention.
can be a believer in God and still make stupid decisions. And he's thinking, once they start going, he says, am I going to look bad? I let all these people go? I'm not going to let them win. And then he decides to chase them again. You're right.
That pride got to him.
That's a good one. Yeah, pride. The Egyptians urged them to hurry and leave the country. After going through those 9 plagues with lice and grasshoppers and frogs and all these things, they want these people out of here. For otherwise, they say, we will all die. Because they don't know that it's just going to be the firstborn. They think they may all die. So the people took their dough before the yeast was added, and they carried it on their shoulders in kneading troughs and wrapped in clothing. The Israelites did as Moses instructed and asked the Egyptians for articles of silver and gold and for clothing. Got that? The Lord had made the Egyptians favorably disposed towards the people, and they gave them what they asked for. So they plundered the Egyptians. Was that all right for them to do that? Remember, God had said this would take place hundreds of years before it actually took place in Egypt. We go all the way back to Genesis 15, and the Lord said to Abram, way back there, know for certain that 400 years your descendants will be strangers in a country not of their own, and that they will be enslaved and mistreated. But I will punish the nation they serve as slaves, and afterward they will come out with great possessions. So it was even predicted they were going to come out with all these possessions. God's plans still moving along. The Israelites journeyed from Ramses to Succoth. There were about 600,000 men on foot besides women and children. So how many people? I'm not going to give a number. I'll let you give me a number. A million?
Over a
and a
million,
half.
I would think.
A million and a half?
Over a million.
Yeah. If you read somewhere that tells you how many people there were, that's what Scripture is based off of. It's off of this one right here. Many other people went up with them, and that's interesting, but you don't get any word what these other people are. Many other people went up with them, and also large droves of livestock, both flocks and herds. So they really came out with a lot. The people were just fed up. Take whatever you want out of my house. I just don't want to die. Get out of here. With the dough the Israelites had brought from Egypt, okay, dough, bread dough. With the dough the Israelites had brought from Egypt, they baked loaves of unleavened bread. The dough was without yeast because they had been driven out of Egypt and they did not have time to prepare the food for themselves. That's the way God wanted, because He needed that to be part of the festival of unleavened bread years later, so it would pass information down to their children. Now, the length of the time that the Israelites lived in Egypt was 430 years. At the end of the 430 years, to the very day, the large division, all the large divisions, instead of divisions, you could say tribes, the large tribes, left Egypt. Because the Lord kept vigil that night to bring them out of Egypt. On this night, all the Israelites are to keep vigil to honor the Lord for the generations to come. I didn't know if I could have time to do this one, but we got 10 minutes. This is still part of today's lesson anyway. There's some restrictions about that God gave. The Passover meal was to be eaten before the festival of the unleavened bread. It's a Passover meal. If you remember, Jesus had the Passover meal, what day of the week?
Thursday.
Huh?
Thursday?
No. Tuesday,
Thursday night.
Thursday.
Thursday night, Friday.
We would call it Thursday night, but as soon as the sun goes down, it's the next day, so it's Friday. So that's a hard one to answer. Is it Thursday? In our world, yeah, it's Thursday night, which makes it Friday for them.
They prepared it on Thursday.
Yeah, they prepared it on Thursday before the sun went down. Yeah. And then they had that meal on Thursday night. And then you start the festival of the unleavened bread for 7 days. So it starts with the Passover meal. Now, here we got some problems going on between the Jews. Here it is. Some Jews believe that the Passover meal is to eat before the 7 days of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. So that would make it a total of an 8-day event, right? And while other Jews believe, no, when you eat the Passover meal, that's the first day of the festival, making it a 7-day event. So even today, some Jews believe it's an 8-day event, and some believe it's a 7-day event. Make sense? Not very important, though, is it? Not to us. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron, these are the regulations for the Passover meal. Now, this thing, God gives the information here, and then later on the Jews start building on it until what they have a Passover meal today is, what do they call it? Seder? S-E-D-E-R? Seder? Yeah, it's got stuff in there that, oh my gosh, all these little cups and all this stuff and different types of herbs and all. So it gets really expanded. It said no foreigner may eat it. Any slave you have brought may eat it after you have circumcised him, but a temporary resident or a hired worker may not eat the Passover meal. It must be eaten inside the house. Take none of the meat outside the house. Don't know why. Do not break any of the bones. The whole community of Israel will celebrate it. Talking about that lamb, but you don't break the bones. Does that relate to anything?
Christ on the crucifixion.
Yeah, in Isaiah it says not one bone of him will be broken. And it wasn't. Remember, the soldiers went up to break his legs. That's what they usually do. And they didn't on Jesus. They poked him with a spear until he's dead, and they didn't break any bones. It's funny how the Old Testament just resurfaces in the New Testament. A foreigner residing among you who wants to celebrate the Lord's Passover must have all the males in the house circumcised. Then he may take part like one that is born in the land. No uncircumcised male may eat it. The same law applies both to the native born and to the foreigner residing among you. Just some restrictions he put in. All the Israelites did just what the Lord had commanded Moses and Aaron. And on that very day, the Lord brought the Israelites out of Egypt and their divisions, or their tribes. I'm not going to go into chapter 13 on there. There's a few more verses. I'll stop right here. The Passover meal was so critical in meaning to the Jews, but it's meaningful also to Christians, because that Thursday afternoon, David, his disciples said, Lord, let us go into town, we'll get the food to bring back for the Passover meal. And when it became dark, there it was time for the Passover meal, because that would be Friday now. So on that night, Jesus changed the Passover meal to the Lord's Supper. You need to know that. He changed it. He didn't do everything they do today in the Passover meal. He knew that his death, he talked about his death. He took the cup, he took the bread, and he says, this is what you do. You don't have to have the Passover meal celebration. This is what you do in remembrance of me. Now, we still have that when they do, Jews celebrate Passover, and then the first Sunday after Passover is Easter. Remember, Thursday afternoon, prepare the meal, that night eat it, that would be Friday. He went to the cross on Friday, okay? And then he arose on Sunday. The first Sunday after the Passover meal, he arose. He arose. So we have a problem with the Hebrew calendar of where Passover is going to move. That's the reason Easter can go anywhere from March 26th to April 25th. That whole window, because they do Passover is based on, it's the first full moon after the spring equinox. You got that? So that could be anywhere in here, and that's time for it. And so we have to wait till after that, and that's when we know where Easter is. But that kept moving, so years back, hundreds of years ago, they finally settled. They got them to agree, we're gonna call March 26th the spring equinox. Now, if you look at your calendar, sometimes it's the 25th, sometimes 28th, kind of moves around because there's not an even number, not an exact 365 days a year, so it can shift back and forth. So we use the 20. Now we don't have to wait on we can go and look. Here's March 26th. Where's the first full moon? Here? Okay, and that's the day that they do Passover. Where's the next Sunday? That's Easter. That's one of these target moves, because the full moon could be early, it could be late over here during that time. I know that don't make a lot of sense. I taught a lesson on it one time. I taught it about 3 times in here. Easter, one is to keep moving, and it's all kind of based on the old Hebrew calendar. See, they think every time you get a new moon, that's 1 month. Well, that's only 29 and a half days. But if you do that 12 times, that's only 354 days. You're 11 days short of a year. Y'all got that? I'm going to do the math test next week. Now, question time. Would y'all like me to just continue on with Exodus and maybe give you some updates occasionally? Yeah. Exodus is hard to walk away from. There's a lot of events that take place. We'll keep going that way. What I might do is do a 5-minute thing if I have something on each Sunday or some of these things. With that, anybody got a word to say? Anybody enjoyed the lesson? Both of them? Okay. Let's have a word of prayer, Lord.